At 4:12 p.m., my tires hadn't stopped crunching gravel when I heard the sound that shouldn't live inside my cabin, silverware clinking, someone laughing in a voice I'd never met, a playlist hiccuping between songs it picked for strangers. The porch light was on. My porch light doesn't turn on until dusk unless a human asks it to. I killed the engine. Minnow, my dog, lifted her head from the passenger seat with a question. Then a woman burst from the screen door like a storm with a clipboard. "Police!" she shouted at her phone. "We have an intruder at 18 West Point. He's breaking into our cabin." It took me exactly one beat to find her face under the visor. Diane from the HOA, committee chair for everything, a woman who thinks a clipboard is a badge and a flyer is a statute. The same Diane who once zip-tied a courtesy notice to my gate for non-compliant Adirondack chairs. "Ma'am," I said, small and calm because the afternoon had already gone big and loud, "this cabin is mine." She raised a hand toward me as if she could stop a deed with a gesture. "Owner's away," she said, breathless. "We have guests." A man in a golf shirt peered over her shoulder like an understudy who just realized he was on stage. Behind him, two women in matching flannels came into my kitchen carrying a bag of ice and a cake shaped like a fish. The cake had more confidence than anyone outside the screen door. I set my keys on the hood so my hands were empty in case the deputies rolled in hot, unlocked my phone with a thumb that remembered my father's number more often than mine, and did the only thing that keeps a day from turning into a headline. I called the calm number. "County Communications," a voice said. "Level. Practiced. The steadiness you wish you could pour in coffee." "Non-emergency," I said, because breathing is a skill. And then, "This is Mark Hart at 18 West Point. I just arrived early to my lakeside cabin. I believe an HOA volunteer has been hosting people inside. No weapons, no threats from me. She's called 911 claiming I'm the intruder. Would you send deputies in a lake patrol unit? I have ID, deed copy, and camera logs. Units en route," she said. "Stay outside. Don't engage." "Copy," I said, and leaned on the truck with the quiet of a man whose day had decided for him but not his temper. The cabin's a rectangle of cedar and history. My grandfather built it in 1964 with treated lumber and promises, when the Cove still thought it was a secret. He cut the rafters with a handsaw and a hymn. My dad sanded the porch so many summers the boards moved under his palms like they knew him. I have one mug that lives only here. Chipped enamel, blue, tasted like fish when I was 7, and like hope by the time I realized what the lake does to a person who keeps returning. The subdivision came later, on pasture that had hosted cows and weddings, and one 4th of July picnic where my cousin proposed to a girl who said yes because the lake knew their names. The HOA runs roads and the clubhouse and the part I didn't consent to, the conversation about what the lake should feel like. Our lot, roomy wedge at the mouth of the Cove, recorded in black ink long before the developer drew a brochure. Not in the HOA, riparian rights to the center line. Dock permitted. Tax bill paid with the reliability a mortgage forces into your hands. I put all that in a folder labeled "Paper We Keep Because I Am My Father's Son." I keep a copy in the cabin and a digital version in the cloud. The HOA sent optional lake club invites at first. Then everyone contributes letters. Then a friendly reminder to lend our cabin to community events while you're away because it builds togetherness. We said no like adults. We stayed polite. We fed neighbors who asked to tie to our dock for 10 minutes to get ice for a kid who's learning how to be hot and okay at the same time. Last winter, an HOA volunteer asked if the summer wedding tour could route through our porch for ambiance. I wrote back, "Ambiance lives in people's homes. We love the lake. Our porch stays ours." She signed the email, "Nevertheless." We put more latches on the screens. A woman in flannel stepped onto the porch with the cake like an apology. "Is this not the community cabin?" she asked, cheeks bright with embarrassment that wasn't hers to carry. "This is my family's cabin," I said, gentle. "You didn't know." "You're okay." She looked at Diane. Diane did not look back. Diane was busy narrating for her phone. "He's still here," she said in a breathy stage whisper, as if active verbs become laws if you speak them toward a lens. "He claims he owns it. "Show me your invite," I said to the women, to the man. To the day. They held out printed tickets that said Sunset Sips, Lake Club, Community Gathering, 18 West Point, Donations Welcome. Donations. There was a QR code that processed via an events consultant LLC with a P.O. box and a trust in the rhythm of strangers. "Did you pay?" I asked. "We donated," one said. 50. I swallowed anger like you learn to swallow sudden rain, tilting your head so it falls past your eyes. "Your guests," I said. "You've done nothing wrong. When deputies arrive, tell them everything." The man in the golf shirt stepped further out. "Shoulders doing that thing men's shoulders do when they feel foolish and want to turn it into authority." "Look," he said, softer. "We were told this is the HOA cabin. The Facebook invite said owner supports community. We would not have—" "I know," I said. "I believe you." "You're not supposed to be here," Diane said, triumph returning to her throat. "We scheduled the cabin." "You scheduled theft by deception," I said, so mild the sentence sounded like tea. Small sirens, not the screaming kind, rolled onto the road. Lake Patrol idled in off our dock, blue light strobes small and respectful. Sergeant Owens stepped out of the cruiser with his usual kindness, eyes that read rooms, boots that remember not to bring gravel into anyone's house. He nodded to Lake Patrol Officer Marco, who took up the place where boats meet land like a translator at a friendly border. "Afternoon," Owens said. "Who called?" "She did," I said. "And I did." I raised my hand like a human who was once a kid in a classroom that taught you how to borrow respect from your own bones. "I'm the owner. Mark Hart. ID and deed are in my left pocket. My phone has smart lock logs and camera clips that show entries while I was away. There's no emergency, just a very dumb day." He took my ID, glanced at the address, at the photo that still had my old haircut and a beard I wish I could grow back, and said, "Thanks." He handed it back like trust can be ordinary. "It can, ma'am." He said to Diane. "He broke into our cabin," she said, breath all wobble, hand possessing pronouns that don't belong to her. "We had a community event scheduled. Owner approved." "Show me approval," he said. "In writing? Signed?" She lifted her phone, showed him a board vote yes, Sunset Sips at West Point, and smiled the smile of someone who thinks votes trump deeds. My father would have told a story about ships and anchors. I swallowed mine. I waited. Owens looked at the QR code on the guest's paper, the Lake Club consultant recipient, the lack of a signature that wasn't her own, or a board comment string that mostly said, "Are we allowed to?" and the word nevertheless. He nodded at my phone. "You said you have locks and cams?" "Yes," I said. "Smart lock log shows a unique code used 3 times this week while I was out. I didn't create it. My cabin camera caught the code entered. The person entering is the gentleman over there in the HOA polo." The gentleman in the polo discovered a sudden interest in my solar path lights. His face did the thing cats do when confronted with cucumbers. He whispered to Diane, who snapped, "We had the contractor code." She said it like, "Contractor code is a skeleton key for ethics." "Contractor codes expire," I said. "Mine did 2 years ago. Whoever had yours kept it longer than my patience." Marco stepped on deck as if entering a stage that needed a line delivered calmly. "Whose boat is that tied to your dock?" he asked the flannel women. "Karen's," they said in unison, the new name heavy with a story they had just learned without asking for it. "Please untie an idol in the cove," he said. "You're not in trouble. You were lied to. You're about to have the weirdest story at dinner." Owens looked at me. "Do you want to press trespass charges?" he asked. The question wasn't a weapon. It was a tool laid on a table between adults. "I want a trespass warning served on her and Mr. Polo for my cabin and deck," I said. "And I want a statement from the guests for the record. And I want to go inside my house." He nodded. "We can do that." Owens took statements under the shade of the maple my dad planted when I was 5, the one I broke my arm falling out of, the one that has forgiven me for more gravity than I deserve. The guests were brave and embarrassed and angry at the right person. One of them teared up when she thought about being in my kitchen. I told her boots had touched a floor that knows worse than inconvenience and will survive this too. The polo man coughed up the code he'd used. He admitted a handyman who once worked in our cove had given him a master entry in case of emergency. He could not explain why Sunset Sips is an emergency. He tried fundraiser. Owens tried theft by deception. Then Owens tried. We'll pass this to the DA's investigator. Because the only thing better than a satisfying sentence is a bureaucratic one that later writes checks. Diane stared at the gravel. She didn't go in the cruiser. She didn't do the long walk you watch on TV. Owens told her the DA would decide on charges. Probably misdemeanor trespass and a civil theft referral for the donations. He read the trespass warning for my parcel. She signed in a hand that looks like control when it runs out of ink. Do I get to keep the money? She asked, and the DA almost laughed out loud. No, Owens said. The recipients of your QR code will get a visit. You'll all have the conversation with restitution in it. The flannel women offered to help clean. I said, no, thank you. The mental part matters more than crumbs. Go home. You're fine. They hugged me from a distance with their faces and apologized 100 times for a thing they did not do. I will invite them back someday to my deck for a drink they do not have to donate to. Today was not that day. I walked in last. The cabin smelled like lemon wipes and someone else's perfume. My counter had crumbs shaped like strangers. A bottle of red sweated quietly next to my sink. In the living room, a folded stack of blankets from my cedar chest sat on the couch like the aftermath of a sleepover we didn't host. I opened my phone to the cabin camera and slid the timeline back 3 days. People carrying trays, people entering codes, people pausing to admire the photo of my father and me holding the first walleye I ever caught from this dock. That photo deserves better listeners than this day had given it. I saved clips. I locked the screen. I sat on the floor next to the fish-shaped rug my niece insisted we buy and cry the way adults do when a room mends itself around you. Minnow put her chin on my knee in the way dogs learned from people who have survived worse with less. The emergency HOA meeting that night felt like a pew suddenly grew in a clubhouse. The insurance carrier called in. The county's DA investigator sat at the back with a notebook and a face that has seen everything and prefers charts. The board president, Evan, looked 10 years older and better for it. We think we're a club, he said. We are a corporation with rules and risks, and we got both wrong. The HOA attorney stood. The association has no authority to enter private homes or host events on parcels outside the declaration, he said. It cannot collect funds for events in those spaces. Volunteers may not use contractor codes for any reason, Carla tried to say. Nevertheless, the attorney shushed her with a finger and the room clapped because sometimes comedy writes itself. 3 motions passed in the kind of silence that sounds like choosing something hard and right. Acknowledge that Lot 7, my parcel, and other legacy parcels are not in the declaration, cannot be billed or scheduled, and are completely outside HOA jurisdiction. Dissolve the events consultant arrangement. Retain a licensed CPA to audit any money collected under donations, notify payers, and issue refunds. Adopt a no-entry, no-codes policy. No board member or volunteer may solicit, store, or use codes for any private home. All contractor codes must expire per owner direction. Any future community events must be held at HOA facilities only with signed, posted permission and a certificate of insurance. The DA investigator stood. We'll handle the criminal side, she said, but fixing this is on you. The room nodded like summer grass. Diane looked at the scuffed spot on the floor where her chair legs had dragged. She didn't speak. You don't try nevertheless when the room has found its voice. The DA charged Diane with misdemeanor trespass and attempted theft by deception. She took a plea to trespass and unlawful solicitation for the donations. 2 years probation, community service at the food pantry, restitution paid from the Lake Club consultant account, which turned out to be her cousin's Venmo with a name like Lake Life LLC. The polo man was charged with misdemeanor criminal tampering for the keypad use and trespass. He took a plea, too, probation, a fine. a promise to never touch a keypad without a contract again. The insurance carrier insisted on board training with a real property law attorney and a meeting run by a real parliamentarian. HOA emails got shorter. Their fonts got smaller. Their threats went away. The HOA newsletter added a box called Know the Map, with a parcel boundary that looked like my relief. The audit found $3,128 in donations. They mailed refunds to the flannel women and everyone else who had been told community gathering. The letter contained the rare HOA sentence. "We apologize." I printed it and stuck it to the fridge like art. The next morning, I changed the smart lock and deleted every code that wasn't written in my hand. I also put an old-fashioned deadbolt on the inside of the cabin door, the kind you can slide when you're in and the world is out, the kind my grandfather trusted when storms thought they owned the lake. I washed blankets and wiped counters and stood on the dock with a cup of coffee that tasted like cedar and promise. Jerry called across the cove, "You okay?" And I said, "Yes." And it surprised me how true it felt. A week later, I hosted the flannel women and their husbands and their little ones for an actual sunset sip. I grilled. They brought a cake that looked like a pie because life can be complicated on purpose if you do it right. We talked about nothing that matters and everything that does. We turned a bad day into a better habit. Diane walked by once on the pathway above the shoreline in a visor that looked more like a hat than a flag now. She raised a hand without expecting anything to come back. I raised mine. Minnow added a tail wag. "You can't fix every story. You can mend this chapter. The lake is a mirror and a boundary and a teacher. It tells you that power without permission is as fragile as a wake in a shallow cove. It shows you that maps outlive mouths. It reminds you that kindness is stronger. With a lock and a camera and a phone number on your fridge for the people who wear badges and sit through training and become the boring heroes we need." Here's what I learned. When a neighbor turned my porch into a stage and the deputies turned it back into a home, don't go inside angry. Call dispatch. Meet the day with witnesses. Paper beats posture. Keep copies. Deeds, permits, parcel maps, smart lock logs. Boring things are safeties. Treat guests like guests. The people fooled by a flyer aren't your villains. Help them go home with dignity. Aim your anger where the map says it belongs. Fix systems, not just people. No entry, no codes, audits, refunds, training. That's how you keep the next porch calm. Let the lake remind you, we are neighbors long before we are anything else. We practice it or we forget. If you like stories where clipboards meet maps and the lake decides for the right team, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me your wildest HOA moment below. I'll bring the grill. You bring the receipts.